Pedal and Amid Beis, towards the end of the Amid. We're in the middle of this cheshbon. The Gemara had started this discussion with a teaching of Rav Eina. Rav Eina taught that if you shecht on Shabbos for a chayla, so pikuach nefesh, you still have to do kisei adam. Even if that involves muksa, it's still allowed, it's still kisei adam. To that, Rabbi said it's a pella, and he's for sure incorrect. Why? Because it's a brisa. Now the brisa is referring to the machlekes of Yaisi and the Rabbanon, whether a koi, which is a suffix chai, a suffix behema, do you do kisei adam on Yom Tif on a koi? Because again, kisei adam is muksa, so is it permitted for a suffix? So Rav Yaisi said, no, you're not mechasen dama. Why? A kavachomer. Ma mila shevadei doicha Shabbos. Now a mila is doicha Shabbos, but when it's a vadei chiyuv, but a suffix mila is not doicha Yom Tif. So a vadei is doicha Shabbos, but suffix is not doicha Yom Tif. Kisei adam, which is not doicha Shabbos, of course the suffix is not doicha Yom Tif. So by the way, that was the source that we saw. You see, it's vadei, it's not doicha Shabbos. So you see, there's no kisei adam on Shabbos. But again, the Gemara now is just going to finish up this discussion. So the Rav Yossi's kavachomer is kisei adam is learned out from bris milah. If bris milah is doicha Shabbos, but suffix is not doicha Yom Tif, then kisei adam, which is not doicha Shabbos, einoi din that koi, which is a suffix, is not doicha Yom Tif. So they said to Rav Yossi, what about tkiyah shofar? Tkiyah shofar throws a wrench. Why? Your point is that if something is vadei doicha Shabbos and suffix is not doicha Yom Tif, kavachomer kisei adam, which vadei is not doicha Shabbos, einoi din suffix is not doicha Yom Tif. Tkiyah shofar, outside of the Beis Hamikdash, is an issue with your kavachomer. Why? Because it's not doicha Shabbos, right? We don't blow shofar on Shabbos, but suffix is doicha Yom Tif. Okay, just to finish up that brisa, and then the Gemara will analyze it. Rav Elazar Kafeh Berevi added another point that Mila, you can't learn out kisei adam from Mila because Mila is not noyeg on Leil Yom Tif, but kisei adam is noyeg on Leil Yom Tif. Okay. So the Gemara says, what does it mean that tkiyah shofar, which is doicha Shabbos, but suffix is not doicha Yom Tif? What's suffix? So it says the Gemara, Amrulai, they said to Rav Yosi, tkiyah shofar b'gvul techiach. She'ein vadei doicha Shabbos, seka doicha Yom Tif. Shofar is suffix doicha Yom Tif. My svega, what does it mean? Just pasha, what does it mean? What's the case? What's the suffix? Ilim is suffix chol, suffix Yom Tif. Maybe suffix doicha Yom Tif means sveka d'yoma. Does that, wait, so you're telling me that we would not blow shofar on sveka d'yoma? What are you talking about? If you blow shofar on Rosh Hashanah. Even if it's a suffix, Rosh Hashanah or Chol, of course you blow shofar. What does it mean suffix, you don't blow shofar? Hashavada Yom Tov Dachi, a suffix Yom Tov Chol Mi Boy. What does it mean that you don't blow on a suffix? And don't tell me it's a suffix, whether it's really Yom Tov, because it might be Chol. Then for sure blow shofar. I don't understand. So it says the Gemara, suffix ish, suffix isha. The Gemara says what it means is a suffix. You blow shofar for a suffix. It means a suffix man, suffix woman. Meaning the Rabbanon hold that obviously only men are chayiv in tkiyah shofar. That's universally accepted. It's a mitzvah mangrama. The Rabbanon hold that blowing shofar when you're not obligated is actually aser, because it's considered a tircha. It's not a malacha, but it's a chachma. It's rabbinically forbidden to blow shofar on Shabbos or Yom Tiv when it's not a mitzvah, and women are not obligated, so women are not allowed to blow shofar. But a tumtum, which is a suffix man, suffix woman, we blow shofar for. So you see that even though vadei Shabbos is not, we don't blow shofar on a vadei Shabbos, but on a Yom Tiv, every Rosh Hashanah will blow shofar even in a matzav of suffix, even though for a woman to be aser, we blow it for a suffix. So that throws a wrench in Rav Yossi's cheshbon. Now, how would Rav Yossi respond? So the Gemara says very simple. Rav Yossi holds that women are allowed to blow shofar. Rav Yossi's shita is, meaning your whole premise is that women are not allowed, only men. And yet we blow shofar for a suffix, so we're willing to do an aveira potentially in a matzav of a suffix. So to kisei adam in a matzav of a suffix, maybe you should do kisei adam, even though it involves muksa. Rav Yossi would respond, he holds that women, although they're not obligated to tkiyah shofar, they're allowed to blow shofar. So because a woman is allowed to blow shofar, of course you're going to blow shofar for a tumtum. There's no shayla, as opposed to kisei adam, where if it's legitimately aser, you shouldn't be able to in a matzav of suffix. Rav Yossi l'tamei, Rav Yossi l'shitasai. Rav Yossi shita is that a woman can blow shofar, even though they're not obligated. Where do we find the concept that a woman is allowed to do a potential mitzvah when they're not obligated, even if it involves a potential issue? Titania, b'nei Yisrael samchin, v'loi b'nei Yisrael samchis. The halacha is that smicha of an animal, the men are obligated to do smicha on an animal, not women. And according to Tanakama, they're not allowed to, because they're going to be mishtamish with a kodshim, right? They're going to put their weight on a holy animal when it's potentially not warranted. So because they're not obligated, it becomes aser. It says Rav Yosi v'Rav Shimon nashim seichos rishus. They're allowed to, even though they're not obligated, they're allowed to do it optionally. So the Gemara assumes the same halacha would be for Tkiyah Shofar. Rabbi Yosi holds that women may not be obligated to Tkiyah Shofar, but they're allowed to put themselves in a matziv to make themselves do it anyway. So too, for our discussion, Rabbi Yosi would respond that you're allowed to blow shofar for a tumtum, but that has nothing to do with our discussion, because women are also allowed to blow shofar. It's a kavachomer for a tumtum. Ravina, l'may dekam rabbanan nami isli pircha. The truth is, the Gemara says the argument of the Rabbanan is also flawed. Because Malach Kiyah Shofar shekin vade deich Shabbos b'migdash tamer bekisa de lesa klal. The whole premise of the Rabbanan is that, the Rabbanan's point is that Kiyah Shofar throws a wrench in it. Why? Again, Rav Yosi said that if Mila is not deich Shabbos, but Safek is deich, if Mila is deich Shabbos, but Safek is not deich Yom Tov kavachomer kisei adam, which is not deich Shabbos. So they said, what about Kiyah Shofar? Kiyah Shofar is not Deicha Shabbos, and yet Safek is Deicha Yom Tov. Well, again, so you're matching it up. You're saying Vadai is not Deicha Shabbos, but Safek is. It's not really true. Vadai is not Deicha Shabbos outside of the Beis Hamikdash. But Vadai in the Beis Hamikdash, you would blow shofar. Meaning, on Rosh Hashanah, we don't blow shofar on Shabbos outside of the Beis Hamikdash, but in the Beis Hamikdash you do. So it's not a great example. Mila is Vadai Deicha Shabbos, right? Vadi Dech Shabbos, but Safek is not Dech Yom Tov. So he said, what about Tkiyah Shofar? What was the Tkiyah Shofar Lashon? Tkiyah Shofar Begvulin Techiach. Tkiyah Shofar outside of the Beis Hamikdash is Vada is not Dech Shabbos, but Safek is Dech Yom Tov. Yeah, but in the Beis Hamikdash it's Vadi Dech Shabbos. So the fact that it's Safek Dech Yom Tov is not related to Kisei Adam. I mean, Kisei Adam Vada is not Dech Shabbos. So we're trying to figure out the suffix. So they're saying, Tkiyah Shofar outside of the Beis Hamikdash is Vadei not Deicha Shabbos, but Safek is Deicha Yom Tov. So Safek, yes. Vadei, no. So to by Kisei Adam. Yeah, but by Rosh Hashanah, in the Beis Hamikdash, it is Deicha Shabbos. So it's not a great raya. Kisei Adam is not Deicha Shabbos b'chlal, anywhere. But the Shofar in the Beis Hamikdash it is. You're focusing on the Shofar outside Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, but in the Beis Hamikdash it is. Says the Gemara, Time b'Kisei de lesa klal. Just to finish up one last point, and we'll start a new topic. Rav Elazar of Kafa Berebi says the whole argument that Kisei Adam is the kal and Bris Milah is the chomer is not good, because Bris Milah is not noig b'leil Yom Tov, but Kisei Adam is noig b'leil Yom Tov. The Gemara just clarifies. Milah is not, when it says Milah is not noig b'leil Yom Tov, but Kisei Adam is. Milah is not noig b'leil anything. It's not just leil Yom Tov. Milah is not noig at Laila. Kisei Adam is noig b'layla. So when it says Yom Tov, you really have to take it out. The Gemara says, "B'leil Yom Tov hu delei behane delei naga b'shar yom naga elamala mila shekein ein noheges b'leil b'yamim tayver b'kisei shenoig b'leilos k'b'yamim." And the Gemara just ends the bright by quoting the end of the brayso. Amar Rav Abba ze'echa min advarim sham Rav Chia ein li aleim tshuva v'heishav alaz bar kafa b'Rebbe tshuva. Okay, new topic. The Mishnah says like this. Now, if you remember, about 4 days ago, feels like a long time ago, but on Daf Pei Aleph, there was a machloikes tanoim, whether regarding oisei v'esbenoi, whether shchita she'ena roya shma shchita, and it said it's a machloikes or Shimon the Rabbanan. Or Shimon shita is shchita she'ena roya ena loy shma shchita, and therefore there's no iser of oisei v'esbenoi, and the Chacham disagree. So the two names is Shimon and the Chacham. Our Mishnah says a similar machloikes by whether shchita she'ena roya shma shchita, but not related to oisei v'esbenoi, but rather to Kisei Adam. Is there a chiv Kisei Adam when it's a shchita she'ena roya? And interestingly enough, the Mishnah, instead of quoting what we had before was a Shimon the Rabbanan, it's now Rameir and the Rabbanan. So last time we quoted Rav Shimon against the Rabbanan, not quoting Rameir. Now we're going to quote Rameir against the Rabbanan, not quoting Rav Shimon. That's an interesting point. The Mishnah says like this: Hashoich v'nimtzas treif, you shecht a chay or a bird, and it's found out to be a treifus, so you can't eat it. Or Hashoich l'avodah zara, you shecht for avodah zara. Hashoich chulin b'fneim kasher b'chutz, you shecht a carbon outside the Beis Hamikdash, or chulin inside the Beis Hamikdash. Either way, you can't eat it. Or chayiv oif and eskalim, or you shecht a chayer oif that are meant to be stoned. Rameir machayiv v'cham paichim. So machlokes of the Kisei Adam. Rameir says chayiv because he holds shchita and sharoya shma shchita, and the Chacham disagree. Hashaycha, but it's not v'yadei. Now, if you shecht it and it turns out to be neveli, you didn't actually do good shechita, or hanoicha v'hama'aker, or you pierce the pipes, or you tear out the pipes, potem l'chazis. Then everyone agrees it's not kisadam. Kisadam is only by shechita. Now, let me explain what the Gemara is going to do. It's very interesting. So again, in the previous mission we had a machlokes or Shimon the Rabbanon whether shechita she'roy is shechita ba'osav es benoi, no reference of Rameir, and now you have a machlokes Rameir and the Rabbanon, same shaila by kisadam and no reference of Rav Shimon. So the Gemara actually is going to say like this: the truth is there is no chachamim. There was never chachamim. There was only Rameir and Rav Shimon. Now. And they always felt the same way. Rav Shimon always held shchita ein sharoy lo yishma shchita. Rameir always held shchita shein roy shma shchita. That was always what they were. So why is it that the names are changed? Rabbi agreed with Rav Shimon by oisev es benoi that a shchita shein roy lo shma shchita, as we'll see because he liked the arguments, and therefore he quoted Rav Shimon's shita as, he liked Rav Meir's shita by Oisev es benoi, the shchita sheneroy shma shchita. He liked it so much that he called it the Chacham. And in this Mishnah, he likes Rav Shimon. He likes Rav Shimon's shita so much he called it the Chacham. In other words, there's always Rav Shimon, always Rameir, and they always feel the same way. Rameir always holds shchita sheneroy shma shchita. Rav Shimon always holds shchita sheneroy lo shma shchita. By all cases, by Oisev es benoi, by Kisadam. Why is it that the names are not? It should always be, both Mishnayos should be. Rameir says this, Rav Shimon says this, Rameir says this, Rav Shimon says this. The answer is, Rabbi, who authored the Mishnayos, by Oisev es benoi, liked one opinion, he called it the Chachamim. By Kisadam, he liked the other opinion, he called it the Chacham, because he liked their arguments in each case. The Gemara speaks it out. Amar Rav Rabbi Yechanan, Ra'a Rabbi Tvarav Sha'ameir by Oisev es benoi. Regarding Oisev es benoi, where it just says Rameir's opinion, but it doesn't quote him, it just says his opinion in the name of the Chachamim. That's because Rabbi liked Rameir's view by Oisev es benoi. He liked his argument that it's considered a shchita, and there's an isser of Oisev es benoi, and he called it the Chachamim. Uder Rav Shimon Kisedam, and in our Mishnah, he liked Rav Shimon's opinion, and therefore he called Rav Shimon the Chachamim. Shana B'lashon Chacham. Very interesting. It also shows you how Rameir, or Rabbi, authored the Mishnayos. That he would, put different names to it. Very interesting. Now let's go through. So in other words, Rameir always holds that shchita sheneroy shma shchita. Rav Shimon always holds shchita sheneroy shma shchita. But by each case, they had different arguments to where they get to the conclusion. Rabbi liked Rav Shimon in our Mishnah. He liked Rameir by Oisev es benoi. So let's go through. Oisev es benoi. Rameir's shita is a shchita sheneroy shma shchita, and therefore, if you shech the mother and the child, even if it's not mater achila, it's going to be an isser. My time the Rameir by Oisev es benoi. How did Rameir know that a shchita sheneroy shma shchita by Oisev es benoi? Rabbi Shmuel Levi gomer shchita meshchutei chutz. What says the word shchita by Oisev es benoi? Says the word shchita by shchutei chutz, which is shechting a carbon outside of Beis Hamikdash. Now, every time you shech the carbon outside of Beis Hamikdash, it's a shchita sheneroy because you can't eat the food. It's an avera, and yet it's considered a shchita in that you get punished for it. So you see that shchita sheneroy is shma shchita. So he learned it out from every case where you shech the carbon outside of Beis Hamikdash. That's by definition a shchita sheneroy, because you're not allowed to eat the carbon, right? It's an avera. The animal becomes prohibited, and yet it's shma shchita. It's recognized as a shchita. Vis-a-vis, you get kares. And he says the word shchita over there, and it says the word shchita by Oisev es benoi. Ma'hasam shchita sheneroy shma shchita, af hachanami shchita sheneroy shma shchita. Rav Shimon, who believes that shchita sheneroy lo shma shchita, what does he do with this? Rav Shimon, my time, what is his source? That if you shechted and it's not deemed the animal fit to consumption, it's not considered shchita by Oisev es benoi. Where did he get that from? Amrav Mani bar Potish, Gomar mitvoyach tavach v'hachin. He says, well, we find in the Torah, even though it says shchita by Oisev es benoi, but shchita means to slaughter. There are synonyms for slaughtering, and that's tevicha. We find that when Yosef told his sons to gather to make a meal for the brothers when they came down to Mitzrayim, he said, Tavoyach tavach v'hachein. Prepare shecht taveach v'hachein, and make sure it's a meal for them. So you find a terminology of slaughter. It's not the same word, but it's the same translation. And that's obviously a shchita roy. Obviously, Yosef was not shechting in a way that was prohibited. So you see that it's dafka, has to be slaughtered in a way that it becomes permitted to eat. But if it becomes prohibited, it's not considered a shchita. Malon shchita roy, afkan shchita roy. So in other words, Rameir is learning out from shchita from shchutei chutz, and Rav Shimon is learning out shchita from tvicha from the pasuk by Yosef. So Rameir, what does Rameir respond? Very simple. Darin shchita meshchita, and darin shchita tvicha. Rameir responds, I'd rather, if I have a choice, I pick shchita with the word shchita and not shchita from the word tvicha. Simple. So now the Gemara says the truth is, in general, by drushes, if it has the same meaning, that's close enough. So my nafkamina, what does it matter that it's not the same word? Hatan Rabbi Shmuel, didn't Rabbi Shmuel says v'shava kayin u'ba kayin zui shiva zu'abiyah, even though they're not the same words, but if they have the same meaning, that's enough for a drasha. So why can't you learn out shchita from tvicha if they mean the same thing? So Rameir responds very simply. Rameir responds, yeah, you could use it if they don't have the same word but have the same meaning. You could use them for drashas if you don't have a better alternative. Yeah, if this is all I got, I'll go with it. But I have an opportunity to compare it shchita from shchutei chutz. If you have an option to be perfect, I'll go with that. So how does Rav Shimon respond? Why taka does he not learn out shchita from shchutei chutz? Rav Shimon nami ligmar shchutei chutz. The answer is, again, we're talking about oisev es benoi. So Rav Shimon says, well, shchutei chutz is a carbon. Oisev es benoi applies to non-carbonis as well. So I'm not going to learn out from that. Dan and chulim and dan and chulim mikdashim. Rameir responds, oisev es benoi applies to carbonos and chulin. So I can learn it out from shchutei chutz. Yeah, something that's exclusively chulin cannot be learned out from exclusively carbonos, but also as beno applies to carbonos as well. Rav Meir, otu also as beno kachim milon higi. That is a good taina from Rav Meir, and that argument from Rav Meir that he's comfortable learning out from shchutei chutz, even though shchutei chutz is carbonos, because also beno also belongs to carbonos. Hi, in the Dekam Rav Chia, that's what Rav Chia meant that Ra'a Rabbi Dvarav Shal Rav Meir bosav as beno. That's why in Osav Es Beno, the opinion of Rameir is said in the name of the Chachamim, because Rabbi liked that argument. Now, that's Osav Es Beno. We have the same machlokes of Shchita Shenaroye between Rameir and Rav Shimon regarding Kisei Adam. What's the machlokes by Kisei Adam? So it's very similar. My time the Rameir by Kisei Adam. What's Rameir's source by Kisei Adam? The Shchita Shenaroye Shma Shchita. Amar Shemelokish Gomer Shvicha Meshchutei Chutz. He has a Gzeir Shava. It says the word B'shafach by Kisei Adam. It says the word Shafach by Shchutei Chutz. Malalon Shchita Shenaroye Shma Shchita. Afkan Shchita Shenaroye Shma Shchita. Again, he learns out from Shchutei Chutz in both cases. One time he learns out from the word Shchita. This time he learns out from the word Shvicha. Rav Shimon. What's Rav Shimon's source that by Kisei Adam because the pasuk says by Kisei Adam asher yachel, that you're going to eat the animal, implying there has to be something that's edible. For Rav Meir, what does Rav Meir do with asher yachel? He says asher yachel doesn't tell you that the shchita has to be roy. The truth is, even if you shecht in a way that you can't eat the animal, you have to do Kisei Adam. So why does it say asher yachel? It's excluding a non-kosher bird. Meaning, if you shecht a vulture, there's no Kisei Adam. But a kosher animal, even if you can't eat it, you have to do Kisei Adam. Rav Shimon responds, Oif Tome, my time. Why is it there's no Kisei Adam by a non-kosher bird? Because you can't eat it. So I learn out from non-kosher birds. If there's no Kisei Adam by non-kosher birds, then there's no Kisei Adam by a kosher animal. It's shechted in an improper way. That's a good argument. And that's why Rabbi, when he authored our Mishnayos, he liked Rav Shimon's argument and he quoted it as the Lashon Chachamim. So you have his machlokes by Kisei Adam, and in general, whether Shchita and Rosh Mashchita or not. Rav Abba, go to the next page. Loi l'chol Amar Rav Meir Shchita she'eino royesh mashchita. When Rav Meir said that if you shecht and it does not become mutter to eat, it's considered a shchita. That's not for everything. There is a case where a Meir agrees. Rav Meir agrees that if you shecht improperly, you can't eat the food. Now, meaning, although Rav Meir generally acknowledges a shchita she'eino roya, but not when it comes to you're not allowed to eat the food, though. Now the question is, that's incredibly obvious. So you're telling me that a Meir agrees there's a concept called treifa, that if you shecht an animal and it's a treifa, although a Meir says it's considered a shchita for many halachos, for osav es benos, for Kisei Adam, you can't eat the food. Of course you can't eat the food. That's called a treifa. It's an obvious problem the Gemara is going to point out. And the Gemara says the opposite. And although Rav Shimon believes that shchita and sharoy is not considered shchita, Rav Shimon Rav Shimon agrees that if you shecht a treifa, although it's not considered shchita, but it still removes the tumas nevela. When an animal dies, is normally nevela, tumas nevela. There's no tumas nevela if you shecht the animal. That's also incredibly obvious. There's a concept that if you shecht a treifa, there's no tumas nevela. I already know this. So the Gemara is going to have to point out exactly what is the chiddush of this. Amar Mar, we just got finish quoting these halachas. Lo l'chol amar Rav Meir shchita she'ein roya shma shchita. Ma'oder Rav Meir she'ein matirasa b'achila. The Gemara says, so Rav Meir agrees that if you shecht an animal, although you can't eat it and it's considered shchita, you still can't eat the animal. So where's the pshita? It's pasha. Treifa b'shchita misharia. Where there's no consider of it. You think you could just shecht a treifa and eat it? Of course not. What's the chiddush in this? So the Gemara says, "Leitzricha l'shaychet es treifa." Obviously, if you shecht a treifa, you can't eat it. Rameir is davar pasha. It doesn't have to say that. It means you shecht a treifa and you find a baby inside, a 9-month fetus. Sol katay dechamina, you might think, "Hoil dam Rameir shchita nishin roya shma shchita." Tani lo shchita sima lo by shchita kamash malan. Or Rameir means when he says that a shchita shenaroya, although it's considered shchita, you can't eat it. It's not referring to the mother. Of course, you can't eat the mother. She's a treifa. It means if you shech the mother, and then it's a treifa, and you find there's a 9-month fetus in there, you can't eat the fetus based on the shchita of the mother. Although there's a concept that when you shech the mother, a ben pekua, you could eat the fetus, and the fetus is mutter by the shchita of the mother. But if the mother is a treifa, the shchita is not matter for the baby. The baby needs its own shchita. Okay? And that's what Rameir meant. Here's the problem. If you remember, when it comes to Ben Pekur, Rameir shita is that every 9-month-old fetus you have to shecht, even when the mother is not a treifa. If you shecht the mother, it does not matter achila for the baby. That's Rameir shita. So what's the chiddush over here? That if you shecht the mother and she's a treifa, it's not matter achila for the baby, meaning you have to do a separate shchita. You always have to do a separate shchita on the baby. Says the Gemara, V'tizbara ha'amar Rameir Ben Pekur ton shchita. So the Gemara says, Leitzricha. The Rabbi Savala Karameir v'Savala Karabanan. The answer is Rabbi holds like Rameir and holds like the Rabbanan. Meaning, what we're saying is like this: Rabbi holds like the Rabbanan that if you shecht a 9-month-old mother who has a 9-month-old baby and the mother is a healthy animal, you could eat the baby without doing shchita. Not like Rameir. But when the mother is a treifa, then you have to shecht the baby separately. So when we said this halacha that if you shecht the mother and it's a treifa, the child is not mutter ba'achila by this. This is not Rameir shita. Because Rameir would hold, you always have to shech the baby separately. Rabbi holds like Rameir in one halacha and holds like Rabbanan in another halacha. Meaning he holds like the Rabbanan that normally a shechita of the mother is matir the baby. But when it comes to the mother being a treifa, then he agrees that it requires a separate shechita. V'tzricha the Rabbi savlik Rameir v'savlik Rabbanan. Savlik Rameir damar shechita shenaroy shma shechita. V'savlik Rabbanan damar shechita im matarasai. Kiva damar Rabbanan shechita matarasai. Tahana shechita ima v'lila ba shechita kamash malan. And just to finish up this concept, we said the opposite, that although Rav Shimon holds loy l'chol amar Rav Shimon shchita shenaroy lo yishma shchita, although Rav Shimon holds shchita shenaroy lo yishma shchita, moed Rav Shimon shemetarasa nevela. Rav Shimon agrees that if you shechta a treifa, it does not have tumas nevela. So where it says pshita, meaning although it's not normally considered shchita, it's considered shchita to remove nevela, tumas nevela. Pshita is pashit. I already know this concept. The Amar Rav Yehuda Merav, the pasuk says regarding tumas nevela, v'chiyamas min habehema. Min habehema applies. Not all dead animals have tumas nevela. Some do not. What's the case where it does not? If you shecht a treifa, the tumas nevela does not apply. Mixes behema tama, mixes behema ena matama. Zu treifa sheshachta. So you see that it's mafurish pasuk that if you shecht a treifa, the tumas is gone. So what does Shimon have to say? I agree with that. Of course you have to agree with that. It's mafurish pasuk. The case is, if you shecht a treifa, of course the tumas nevela is gone. That's a davar pasha. The case is where you shechted a treifa that was chullin in the azara. So you might think that because it was in the azara, the tumas nevela is not removed. Kamash malan, the tumas nevela is removed as well. Titania, as the Brisa says, because it's also deraisa to shecht inside the azara. Hasheichet is a treifa. Now, normally, if you shecht an animal inside the azara, a chulin inside the azara, it's asabahana. But says the Mishnah, a brisa, when it comes to shechting a treifa, hashech is a treifa. If you shecht a treifa, the chin hashechin is a treifa, chulin ba'azara, Rav Shimon mater bahana. Rav Shimon says it's mutar bahana. Why? Because Rav Shimon says shchita shein aroya lo yishma shchita, so it's not really as if you shechted inside the azara. So you might think that because he's mater bahana, the treifa, the tumah of nevela is not removed. Salkadei dechamina hoyel v'amrav Shimon mutar bahana. Amalav shchita hiklal ema midei nevela namil matarasai kamash malan. That although it's not considered a shchita regarding the isser hana because it's chulin ba'azara, but it's still considered a shchita regarding removing tumas nevela. Now, normally when you shecht an animal inside the azara, it's asab hana, but we're saying if you shecht a treifa, it's mutar bahana. Why? Because it's shchita shein aroya. Now, why is it a shchita she'ena roya? Because it's Chullin azara. That means that Rav Shimon holds that Chullin ba'azara is asa deraisa. Because if it was just asa derabanan, if Chullin ba'azara was not really a thing, it was just asa derabanan, then it really is biblically considered a shchita, then it would be asa b'hana. The only reason why Rav Shimon holds that it's mutar b'hana is because it's really not a shchita. Why is it not a shchita? It's Chullin ba'azara. Does that mean Rav Shimon holds that it's asa deraisa? Amrle Rav Papa Labai, but Rav Shimon Chullin ba'azara deraisa in? Yeah, Amrle in, yeah. It's Chullin ba'azara is asa deraisa. How do I know that it's not just asa derabanan? V'atanan. Now, Chullin ba'azara obviously only applies conceptually on a biblical level. Even if it's biblical, it only applies to an animal that could be a carbon. Titania, v'atanan, Rav Shimon Amr Chullin shenishlu ba'azara. If you shech Chullin ba'azara, yisru b'eish, you have to burn it because it's asa b'hana. V'chein chaya shenishlu ba'azara. So too chaya as well. Now, a chaya can never be a carbon, and still it's aser b'hana. But you still have to burn it. Now, the Gemara says this indicates that the entire thing of Chullin ba'azara is an issa deraisa. If Chullin ba'azara is an issa deraisa, that means the Torah asered shechting a behema that could be a carbon that's not a carbon in the azara, and Chazal extended it to a chaya. If you believe that Issa Deraisa is because Hashem said, listen, this animal could be a carbon, and you're shechting it in where it could be a carbon, and you didn't make it a carbon, that's Asa Bahana. So then I get why Chazal would extend that to a Chaya. But if the entire thing is only Derabanan by a Behema, why would they extend it to a Chaya as well? So the fact that Rav Shimon says that a Chaya is shechted in the Azar is also Asa Bahana, indicates that the entire thing is an Issa Deraisa. Yam Rishlam Deraisa, Hain the Gazrin Chaya Ata Behema, Liyam Derabanan, Behema my timer. If the entire thing is derabanan, then what's the reason? It's because you shecht it inside the azara, and then you go outside and eat it. If you're allowed to eat it, rabbanan. If it's derabanan, the rabbanan say people are going to think that you're eating a carbon, not with kedusha, and therefore Chazal asered it. If that would be the case, they would not extend it to a chaya. Hagufa gezerah, non nikav nikav gezerah. The fact that he extended to a chaya indicates the entire thing is an issa deraisa. Now, just to finish up a new topic, just to finish up the daf, maybe we'll get to the Mishnah. Rav Chia nofale ya'aniva bekisna. Rav Chia had moths that were eating his flax. So Asla Kami the Rabbi, he asked Rabbi for advice. Amarle shekol oifa. Apparently blood, if you put blood in the water that the flax soaks in, it'll stop moths. So take a bird, shchoigle bebusa demaya, shecht it over the water, and the water goes into the flax. They'll smell the blood and they'll stop. So basically, shecht a chicken over the flax, the blood will go in and that'll stop it. Here's the problem. What about kisei adam? Now, if you tell me kisei adam only applies to shchita, so if you would have told him shoot the chicken in the head and let the blood go in, okay, there's no kisei adam. But shechting is kisei adam. So how could you tell him to just shecht it over the water? There's no. What about kisei adam? It's a mitzvah min Torah. Heichi avirachi. But if one shechs and needs the blood, you have to do kisei adam. So ketzah yaser. So what if I need the blood and I don't want to do kisei adam? Either pierce the pipes or tear out the pipes. Meaning, don't shecht it. Shoot in the head. But if you shecht it, you have to do kisei adam. So how could Rabbi give him advice to shecht it over water? So the Gemara gives two explanations. Both explanations, Rabbi never said shecht. Kiyasar Rav Dimi Amar Tzei v'troif Amarle. Rav Dimi said he actually told him make the animal a treifa, make the bird a treifa, then shecht it. And he holds that a shchita she'ena roya lo yishma shchita. Therefore, once it's a treifa, it doesn't have to kisei adam. And he's getting involved in machlokes of Shimon and Rabban. Kiyasa Rabban Amar, he says no, say nocher Amarle. He says no, he never said to make it a treifa because that's totally in the machlokes of shchita she'ena roya. He never said shecht. He said tear out the pipes. So the Gemara just explains why does each opinion not like the other. Laman da Amar Tzei Troif, the one who says that he told him to rip, to make it a treifa, my tamili Amar Tzei Nachar, why didn't he just say pierce the pipes? Simpler. So v'chi tema, I'll tell you maybe. What's the chiddush? Now if he said that treifa, the chiddush is that although you're making a treifa and then shechting it, the chiddush is that you don't have to do kisei adam, and that's related to the machlokes of Shimon the Rabbanon. It's following Rav Shimon that shchita she'ena lo yishma shchita. That's one chiddush. I'll just say this outside. If you say that he told him to tear out the pipes, the chiddush is that you don't have to do kisei adam when you tear out the pipes. Why is that a chiddush? Because it could be that there's no shchita oif min haTorah. there was an opinion that held that shchita sa'oif is only derabanan, that even if you tear out the pipes or pierce the pipes, it's considered shchita biblically. Then you would have to do kisei dam. So each one has a chiddush. And if you tell me, why did he not say troif? Now, if it's telling me, I'm sorry, the one who said troif, why did he not say to pierce the pipes? And if you want to say he didn't say pierce the pipes, he didn't like that version because he held that piercing the pipes is considered a shchita min haTorah and you have to kisei adam. Vatanya, Rabbi Omer kasher tzivisicha. Rabbi himself said that Hashem commanded you regarding the cattle. The Moshe Rabbeinu was commanded regarding the esophagus and trachea, that you have to shecht it. 2 or roiv of 2 by a behema, and 1 or roiv of 1 by a bird. So you see that Rebbe's opinion is that if you you have to shecht bin haTorah. So piercing is not going to be enough. So why did he not say piercing? It was a good eitzah. So the answer is, you're right. He could have loy mi boy ka'amar, loy mi boy tzei nachar, t'lav shchiti klal. He could have said piercing because that's poshit, that you could avoid kisei dam and you could do it over the water. Al tzrei troif. But the case of rendering a treifa, the chiddush is that still works. Why? You might think that a shchita and a roy is considered shchita, and you have to do kisei dam like Rav Meir. Kamash malan k'derchiva rabba. Kamash malan, that Rebbe held like Rav Shimon. That's why he quoted Rav Shimon in the Lashon Chachamim. The shchita and a roy loish mashchita. And the Gemara says the opposite. Lamanda amar tzei nachar. And according to the one who said pierce the bird's necks, why did he not say troif? And don't tell me it's because he holds that if you treif up the bird and then shecht it, you have to kisei dam like Rav Meir. I thought Rebbe passes like Rav Shimon. In other words, if Rebbe passes like Rav Shimon, then you could just make a treif and then shecht it. So why do you have to say pierce the neck? So the answer is, you're right. He could have. Piercing the neck is a bigger chiddush, that shchita is a biblically required concept, and piercing the neck is not considered kisei adam. Loi mi boy kamer, loi mi boy tzei troif, the shchita shenaroi losh mashchita, avol tzei nochar ema ein shchita loiv min haTorah, unechirasa zu shchitasai, leboy kisei kamash malan, kasher tzivisicha, kamash malan, kasher tzivisicha, that kasher tzivisicha is that the shchita is a biblically mandated concept, and therefore piercing the neck is not going to be chayav kisei adam. I will stop here. We'll pick up the rest. I got it to the Mishnah. We'll pick it up tomorrow.